this workshop, title of the workshop, A Window into the World of an MSc Advanced Clinical Practitioner Apprentice. What is the reality? So we put together this workshop as what I will call a goldfish bowl technique. So pre-COVID, we would be in a classroom setting, I guess. The three of us as participants will be sat around a table with our audience around us. So that's the kind of technique we've tried to translate into the virtual world, so to speak. So that's why we're really interested to see if it works and how it works really in this new era of delivery. So I suppose we should introduce ourselves, shouldn't we? So Cathy, do you want to go first?
My name's Kath Fletcher. Okay, I'm the program lead for the Advanced Clinical Practitioner Apprenticeship program. But for today, I'm going to act in the capacity as a mentor who is supporting an apprentice. So that's my role for this particular workshop.
And Matty, the star of the show, do you want to introduce yourself? Explain to people your day job and your real role in reality, as well as today.
Yeah, so my name's Matty Savage. I'm a ward manager in Ashworth Hospital, which is a high secure mental health hospital in Liverpool, and also doing the apprenticeship program. So just about in the third year now, so in the final year, and just about to start the final module, the endpoint assessment in September. So just sort of finalising with that.
Yeah. So Matty's appearing as himself this morning, aren't you? Although we did think it would be useful, as Matty's now coming towards the end, he's obviously very familiar with all the contents of his portfolio. We thought he would act maybe as if he was a bit earlier, a little bit sort of maybe beginning year 2, so he wasn't quite sure of things, so that he could ask a few more questions as well. So my name's Kath Gordon. I work as part of the postgraduate team alongside Cathy and support a number of what we call LATs. LAT stands for Liaison Academic Tutor. And all our apprentices have an individual liaison academic tutor that they will meet with 3 to 4 times a year as a minimum. If they need any additional support, we can provide that. But there are points within the calendar year, the academic year, where we will meet with students. So we are currently meeting with all our LATs, as we call them, our apprentices at the moment, to see where they're up to and monitor their progress. So I guess we need to maybe just explain a little bit about the apprenticeship program, because it is quite different to your standard MSc program. I think the key difference is these LAT meetings and the development of the portfolio for all these apprentices. So alongside the standard traditional master's levels modules that the students have to complete, they also have to complete this portfolio of evidence in parallel. It doesn't actually sit in any particular module. It's not attached to any particular module, but the students must complete this before they go on to their final module, which is the endpoint assessment module. So it is a key component. The students will not complete the apprenticeship program if they don't complete this portfolio of evidence. And this is the focus really of the LAT meetings. Okay, so just to say what we intend to do this morning, provide a window into one of these key LAT meetings, as a simulated meeting, basically, to demonstrate an understanding of the challenges encountered by this group, because hopefully you'll see from Matt's perspective just what is involved. It's quite a heavy workload for the apprentice and for the staff as well. If you can imagine, they're full-time employees, as Matt said. They've got all their academic study to complete and all their academic credits to achieve, and then this on top of that. So it is quite a challenge to manage. And then also to give you some sort of understanding of the requirements of the apprenticeship and negotiations that are required. Because as I say, there's 3 of us in this role play today, in this simulation. There's Matt as the apprentice, myself as somebody from the HEI, and then Cathy is the mentor that's working alongside Matty in his clinical environment. So it's very much a tripartite meeting. There have to be the 3 of us. One of us is missing, it's not a LAT meeting. So we aim for it to be interactive. This isn't a presentation in any way, shape or form. So please stop us at any point put your hand up if you're misunderstanding, if you want any further information, if we're not clear. Stop us and ask the questions as you would with an on-campus goldfish bowl technique type thing. And as we've said, we could really appreciate the feedback at the end. So we've kind of talked really about what the LAT meeting is about. In reality, a LAT meeting can last an hour plus. It can take really quite a long time. So this will be a condensed version. The key document for the apprenticeship is the commitment statement. Don't know whether you want to explain a little bit about the commitment statement, Cathy. This is a key document in the portfolio.
It is. It's a document that isn't put together by the university. This is a document that is if you think about the apprenticeship, one of the key drivers is the Education Skills Funding Agency, who drive the key aspects of how the programme is run, how it's funded. And at the background of all of this is the government. In a way, this is government driving this. So the government has many different facets and make us jump through many hoops. But the commitment statement is a really useful tool because it does what it says on the tin. It's a commitment statement that all parties have to sign. So the employer signs, the apprentice signs, and the HEI signs it. But within that commitment statement, it clearly identifies what we as a university will offer, including the academic teaching, including the support that we offer. But crucially, it identifies what the employer is signing up for, which is quite a lot of support and commitment to support that employee to complete that apprenticeship. And again, that's a pivotal document that we can't progress. If that commitment doesn't ever get signed at the start of the apprenticeship, you can't carry on with that apprentice. That apprentice cannot come onto that programme. All parties have to commit to this, because as Kath said before, it really is a big commitment all round, and in no way can this happen without everybody being fully committed to the whole process.
Okay. So as we said before, this portfolio of evidence must be compiled over the 3 years and it must be completed. The students will have, and in reality, Matt is coming up to this point now, will have a final LAT meeting. Once they've completed all their academic modules, we call a gateway meeting. And at that gateway meeting, the 3 parties meet again. We go through the portfolio of evidence. We check that it's complete. We check that all 3 parties are happy that it's complete. And only then is the student allowed to move on to this endpoint assessment. And in the endpoint assessment, again, it's not something that the University of Liverpool have put together, but there are 2 components. There's an endpoint assessment exam, and there's also a presentation that the students have to complete as well. But hopefully more detail about that's going to come out as we have the discussion. But really, what the endpoint assessment is about, it's an opportunity for the student to showcase what they have learned, how they've developed over the 3 years of the programme, because what we want to show is that they are working then at that point as an advanced clinical practitioner. That's the whole purpose of this programme. So these are briefly the contents of this portfolio of evidence. So as we work through, you should see that we will talk about each of these elements in turn. So there's a table of standards for an advanced clinical practitioner. There are case studies. Students asked to complete a minimum of 3 case studies that they will take into their exam. We ask the student to reflect regularly for all sorts of reasons. They must complete a change report, just 1 change report, but that will help to support their final presentation. And then we're continually talking about off-the-job training plans and records, because as an apprentice and on an apprenticeship, the employer is committing to providing 20% of the apprentice's time as off-the-job training time for each week that they are on the apprenticeship for the entire 3 years. So that has to be monitored really, really closely. So record keeping is massive for us. So poor old Addie and her team do all this for us, but the record keeping is huge because, as Cathy said, we're talking about government money here. So we do really have to justify where all the money's going. So we're going to start the meeting and we're going to talk through various steps and stages. So the meeting has a structure, but obviously it has to be flexible depending on the responses that the apprentice comes up with, or if there are any issues or any concerns. But we generally talk and see how everybody's doing, how's Matt progressing academically with his portfolio, life in general, because these students do have quite a few issues and things that impact on their studies. We will review the commitment statements as we must do in all these LAT meetings. Has anything changed? We'll ask how the LAT is progressing as far as meeting the standards, this table of standards that they must evidence throughout the programme. We'll talk about reflections, we'll talk about the case studies, talk about plans for the change report, and any plans for off-the-job training. So they're the various stages, and this is why you can probably start to see that a LAT meeting can take a good hour, and there's quite a lot in work, preparation work for both the apprentice and the member of staff that's carrying out the meeting. And then obviously there's a whole action plan that comes out of it as well. So they are really quite time consuming. Okay. So as I said before, please raise a hand and stop us at any point and we can talk about what's going on. So I'm going to stop the presentation at that point so you can see us. So if I stop sharing, are we okay?
Okay, go for it.
Hi, no, I'm just clarifying for me because I have cognitive jump aroundy brain. So, Cathy, you're the mentor. You're the professional mentor from the employer setting?
I am indeed. Yes, I'm representing the employer, and that's why you have to have me present, because the tripartite meeting, in accordance with the Education and Skills Funding Agency rules and regulations, I have to be present to make this a tripartite meeting, to make it one of the required LAT meetings for the programme. If I'm not here, it can't happen. And that's a challenge, to get all three people in a room or in a meeting at the same time, when two at least are working clinically, and that's a challenge. So,
Fab. Thank you. I also said in the chat that your mic is a little bit quiet sometimes.
Mine?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine. There we go. That's it.
Better. I sort of move her out the way so I don't keep knocking it. That's why.
I'm always leaving mine up at the top and forgetting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. So Matty, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, how's life, the family and everything?
Yeah, busy. Trying to fit everything.
Yeah, it's quite difficult juggling everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how's work? It's probably a silly question, but is that busy too?
Yeah, extremely. Mainly around sort of staffing issues and sort of trying to safely staff the place. I think the impact on COVID, I suppose it's the same everywhere, isn't it? But it's had a huge impact on sort of the day-to-day working of the place.
So how is that impacting on them? Are you working more hours? Are you having to cover sick leave?
Sometimes, so when the site is short, we're sometimes doing some additional hours after. So my job's 9 to 5 normally, but we're having to stay late some days, maybe cover some shifts at the weekend when we're short.
Yeah, so how the employer, I rely on Matty a lot, and you're very lucky to have us both here today. I tell you, the world is mad busy, isn't it, Matty? Mad busy we are.
I know. Time's really precious for both of you. I can completely understand that at the best of times, but at the moment, in the last 18 months or so, it's been really challenging, I'm guessing. Yeah. How's it affected you in that way then?
I think sometimes in terms of academically, to have stuff planned, maybe to do some stuff in the evening, and then if you end up staying late, it means you can't do that, and then, or it might be that you plan a day for the weekend, but then staying late or doing extra hours in work means you don't have that same amount of family time, so you have to sort of plan stuff for the weekend. So it does have an impact from that point of view.
So are you still managing to do your study?
Yeah, just about, because I think having this sort of day a week does help, because that's sort of allocated time. I know sometimes it might be that you get a phone call or you get an email through that you have to deal with there and then, but generally you do get that sort of, I have been sort of lucky to have that time allocated.
Okay. Kerry, do you have your hand up?
I do, because I'm wondering if Cathy's attitude about how lucky you are to have them both there is something you encounter often in these tripartite meetings.
Yeah, actually organising the meetings can be really, really difficult. We try all kinds of different we've tried different methods over the 3 years, haven't we, really? Because as you can imagine, we know as HEI staff how busy our diaries are. You can imagine for Matty, who's working full time in quite a responsible role, and then for the mentor as well, who are often the apprentice's line manager, and again have really quite big responsibilities clinically. And this is something we've come to. In fact, we had a meeting only earlier in the week, and I think we've realised we have done some mentor training. We do work with the mentors, but I think over time we've begun to realise just how big a role this is for the mentor, and to make sure they're very, very clear when they commit to this, just what it is that they're committing to. It's quite a lot of time involved. Yeah. So yeah, Cathy's acting skills were number one there. Spot on. Yeah.
I didn't doubt it for a moment.
So where are you up to with your modules then, Matty? So you will have started with our sort of context introductory module, won't you? 409. So you've passed that?
Yeah.
That's all signed off, yeah?
Yeah.
And then what did you do next? Did you do the leadership module?
Yeah, leadership, and I think it was the risk one.
Okay, so the leadership is your core module, your mandatory module. And then what did you say? So then your optional module
was risk.
Was risk. Have you enjoyed that? Was that okay?
Yeah, I mean that's sort of our fundamental what we do day to day. So I found that one okay. I think it was a big difference doing the two modules side by side. I think the first module was just one on its own, but once you go into the second 6 months, you're doing two side by side, and I think it really does sort of step the workload up and is noticeable.
Yeah, I definitely noticed it as Matthew's line manager. It's a big impact for him. I don't know whether this is a good thing that they've got two modules running in the same semester. I personally am not sure that that's a good thing for staff to do going forward.
Yeah, it is difficult. It is a challenge for sure. But then, if we're going to make sure that the programme is complete within 3 years, we ease the apprentices in with that first module. Yeah, first semester, it is only just a one introductory module, but after that, we do double up. But that is to make sure the credits are achieved in the 3 years. If we just did single modules, it would take much longer. Yeah. So you've done your leadership and your risk module, and then after that you would have done a research module, again a core module, and then which optional module have you opted for then?
I think it's the learning and practice.
Learning and practice. And again, Cathy, are you happy with these choices that Matt's made for these optional modules?
I think so. I think the education module, particularly in the research. I mean, Matty is very involved in research, so that's really going to help us as an employer, because we want him to take that forward. And obviously, within his senior role within the trust, education of others is a key component. So both modules worked well for us. But as I say, it was hard work for him to do both at the same time. Hard work.
Yeah. Did you feel supported, Matty?
Yeah. For most of the time, like I said, it's been okay. But I think when something happens on the ward that needs urgent attention, then that takes priority. And I think from a work point of view, then I know there's that commitment statement at the start of it, but that's the priority at the time. Is your sort of day-to-day job. So I think that's been the difficulty, and I think particularly during COVID, there's been more of that.
Yeah. So what kind of marks have you been achieving? Have you discussed these with Cathy? You happy with your marks?
Yeah, I think you'd always want more, wouldn't you? But the main thing is I passed them all first time, so I haven't had to do any research, because I think I would have really had to really struggle to sort of fit any research in, just in terms of time on top of 2 more modules. So
yeah.
Okay, good. So just the dissertation to do, and then your endpoint assessment, and then you'll be done.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the commitment statement there. So that commitment statement, that key document that we all signed off in the beginning, are there any changes to that? All the contact details the same, the content the same, your optional modules were what you signed up for in the beginning, nothing else?
I did change one of the modules.
Okay.
Because there is a communication module which I was initially going to do, but then after discussion with Cathy, we sort of had a bit of a discussion, and we thought the education module would fit more around sort of my role and moving on from there, so we did change it. Okay,
that's good. So so we need to make sure that that commitment statement is up to date, because your evidence pack must be kept up to date in case we get audited, because we could be audited at any point at quite short notice. So we'll make sure that that commitment statement comes out to you again, that we update it, and then you sign it off. You must sign it, and Cathy must sign and date it as well. Then it comes back to me, I can sign it, and then we can put it into your evidence pack.
Yeah.
Kerry's got a question.
I do. This commitment statement seems to be a really big deal for obvious reasons. And I'm just thinking that, the reality is, if you're signing this at the beginning, of course, things are going to change during the time you're doing it, because that's just life, isn't it? And so how easy is it? For example, obviously COVID's happening, etc., etc. Matty, I don't know your personal circumstances, but you might have been having to school from home, etc. Yeah. Is it possible to, just like in a normal MSc or whatever, to put this on hold if you get overwhelmed and then pick it up later or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can take a break in learning. It's called, for the apprenticeship, the apprenticeship has another language to it, so always remember that. So that's why we say, if we start talking in another language that you don't understand, please stop us, because that's the apprenticeship language. So a suspension of studies, which is what the university calls it, is called a break in learning for an apprentice, and that can be initiated by the apprentice or the employer, not usually by the university, but during COVID, it was allowed that the university could instigate break in learning. So again, the rules are slightly different, but most of the time, they can take a break in learning. It can be a reasonably short period of time, but it can be up to a year or more in terms of break in learning. So yes.
Okay. And of course, through COVID, we have had a number of students, for personal reasons, health reasons, all sorts of reasons, have had to take a break and then return. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a challenge.
Yeah, no, I can well imagine. So I can also imagine that keeping this commitment statement up to date is probably quite difficult, because in between these meetings, presumably anything can happen. You might change your module, you might do whatever. So it sounded like, for the auditing purposes, you have to have it up to date at all times. I bet that doesn't always happen, does it, in reality? I'm sure there must be times where it's not up to date. What are the implications of that?
There is potentially a lag in information. You're absolutely right. And the implications are that if we are audited and it isn't up to date, then there could be sanctions put onto us. There could be consequences for us in terms of the program, less so in some ways than any discrepancies in funding or how we pull down funding. But yes, it is important that those commitment statements are up to date, and that's why we have to keep nagging. We do talk about the same things every single lab meeting.
Yeah, because on top of the commitments, so we have a discussion about the commitment statement and if that's up to date or not, and it's all signed off. But then also, Matty, just remind me, have you sent Addy your certificates for your maths and English GCSE?
Yes.
She's got those, has she? Good, big tick. Because as you know, you've got colleagues or others in the cohort that are chasing around parents' lofts trying to find certificates for maths and English.
Stumbled across mine and found them, so.
So you've saved yourself quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Do you know how much it's costing some of the other students?
It's a fair bit, isn't it?
It's a fair bit. I think they're talking around about £100 to get copies of certificates. Again, that's not us. That's not a University of Liverpool stipulation. It comes from the apprenticeship. Yeah. So your maths and English are done. Is all your mandatory training up to date? You've done your prevent training and your safeguarding training, all of that as well. That's good. Brilliant. So as far as your advanced practice standards table, how are you getting on with that? So your table of standards across all 4 pillars of advanced practice.
I mean, to be honest, that's something I haven't looked at much because I think my priorities have been on sort of getting the assignments done, focusing on that. I know every time we have these lab meetings, it sort of brings attention to it and sort of have a look over it. I think I have achieved most of them, but it's just actually going through them and signing them off that I need to do.
Okay, so it's Cathy that signs off to say that the evidence you provided shows that you have met each of these standards. Okay, so how often are you and Cathy meeting?
That's the problem, isn't it, Matty? That we struggle to meet up as often as we would like. Matty's ever so busy, and so am I, and it's very difficult to get together. We try. Sometimes we're working on different sites, aren't we? Matty's in Ashworth and I might need to be elsewhere. So it's a challenge, getting that meeting. But I know that we need to, and, we'll see what we can put in the diary going forward. But again, priority is always about patience, isn't it? Our patients have to come first at the end of the day. And that's the struggle we have. Time is limited.
Okay, so how often do you aim to meet up? Are you meeting once a month?
We try to, don't we, Matthew? We try and meet up once a month. If we can meet up any more often, sometimes our paths cross, don't they? We might be in a meeting and we'll grab a quick conversation. But we try and meet once a month just to talk apprenticeships, if you like. It's difficult. But then we I don't know, probably we shouldn't be telling you this, but we do have, we have these meetings and then we start talking apprenticeship, but then work takes over, doesn't it? We start talking work. And so, it's a challenge. I tell you, all this time that we need to take. I didn't realise when I signed up to be a mentor all the time that it would take me to do this job. I tell you, I had no idea. No idea.
Okay. But obviously, it is really important that you meet regularly, and that time is ring-fenced time to support Matty and to look at the progress he's making, particularly with this table of standards, because it is you as the mentor that signs these standards off. Kerry?
So, I'm wondering whether how much time is allocated to mentors as part of their, because presumably some time is allocated to fulfill the mentorship role. Is that correct or not?
No.
So there's no extra money and there's no time allocation.
This is the challenge that we face. This is why
that is a challenge.
It's a big challenge because it's like the same for any other mentor role. Undergraduate mentoring is not funded and isn't given time to do the role itself. So if you're not funding it and you're not allocating time to it, it means that it's all based on goodwill.
But that's not really very fair across the patch, is it? Because in postgraduate medicine, if you were a doctor, you would get time in your job plan for this. So, I mean, this must be a problem across the board for all apprenticeships. So what are HEE doing about it? You know, what's their solution to this?
I'm not sure they've got one at this precise moment, Carrie, that I'm aware of. All I can tell you is that we had a meeting recently to discuss. They want to identify more clearly what is the role of a supervisor stroke mentor. So I suppose that hasn't been achieved yet. So we're still early days in terms of HE being involved in apprenticeships. So I don't think they've quite got there yet.
Okay. And Matty, do you get time allocated to actually do this work?
Yeah. So we
how much?
20% of our. So we have to do, and then we have to evidence that with off the job training hours. So that can be either time sort of to do the assignments, or it can be sort of a project outside. It just has to be outside of your normal sort of your normal work, really. So I've been doing a lot of project work, which I wouldn't be able to fit into my normal job, and it does fit outside of that, and then I'll be getting that signed off as off the job hours.
Okay, so it's not even as simple as having like a study day a week for this. You've got to prove what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. Gosh, it does sound quite bureaucratic.
The
whole process.
This is where the government comes in, if you like. It's very bureaucratic, and you've got to have a piece of paper or a piece of evidence for more or less every hour that's spent on the program. More or less, one way or another, we've got to prove how every hour is spent, so that we can justify where every penny of the money goes. That's in a nutshell. That's what they want, really.
So, Matty, have you started to gather some evidence to show that you're meeting these standards? You got any ideas?
A lot of it's just sort of, as I've read through, I've realised that I'll be able to sort of sign some of them off. Certainly, some of the assignments that I've completed will be able to evidence some of the standards there. But I suppose it's just about sitting down and spending a bit more time focusing on it is what I need to do.
Yeah, and this is why your meetings between you and Cathy as the mentor are so important, and they really do need to take place regularly, at least monthly, if not more, if you can manage it, so that every time you think you've got a piece of evidence and it relates to a specific standard, you can have that discussion with Cathy, because at the end of the day, it will be Cathy who's there in the workplace with you who will sign these off. Okay, so assignments, any other sort of evidence that you're going to use?
I suppose the reflections sort of used to support that. And again, I think similar, I've made some sort of little notes every time I do something. I try to make some little notes, but to actually sit down and write the reflections out, I think I've, again, just struggled for time to be able to do that.
Okay. Helen?
I just put my mic on. I'm just wondering, Matty, just listening to this, whether you feel that you're managing to demonstrate a journey of your learning, or whether you're finding that some of your work and evidence is really compacted into the last sort of few months of your apprenticeship.
I think certainly when it comes to sort of thinking about the reflections and case studies, it's stuff that I haven't prioritised and I've sort of have left to the end. But when I've been writing them or thinking about them, I've tried to base them on things that have happened over the course of the 3 years, rather than just what's happened now. So, like I said, making little notes and have ideas when something happens clinically, think, oh, that'll make a good reflection, but just not necessarily writing down the reflective piece at the time.
So, Matty, you are clear, aren't you, that there are templates there?
Yeah.
You need to use for your for the reflections. So you're using the templates when you're drafting them.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how long they're meant to be? 1,500 words.
For the case studies, that is, isn't it?
Yeah, and the reflections, you're aware that there are templates there for each of these that you need to use. Yeah. Okay. So series of reflections shall come in. Remember, again, your reflections can be used for two different things. They're used as evidence to show that you're meeting various standards on that table, but they will also help you to identify any learning needs that you can then, as part of your off-the-job training, you can, again, in discussion with Cathy, there may be some events that you might want to attend, or you can certainly use your off-the-job training time effectively based on the learning needs that you've highlighted from your reflections. Yeah. So you're clear what your reflections are about. So you're clear how to write them, the templates you've got to use, the documentation. Yeah. Okay. So you've mentioned case studies there. So how are you doing with your case studies?
Again, I've got an idea of the 3 case studies that I want to write. It was something I sort of didn't quite understand how best to write them, how they wanted to be formatted. I think sort of I did a draft of one, sent it in, and it wasn't quite what we were after.
Okay.
But attended one of these sort of workshops a couple of weeks ago, and I think that was really beneficial. I think I've got a better idea in my head of how to structure them now. Okay.
Again, have you discussed your case studies with Cathy? Are you aware of these, Cathy?
I am aware of Matty's ideas, absolutely. And I did want to get to that workshop as well, because I know mentors could attend, but I couldn't get there. But from what Matty tells me, it seems more straightforward, these case studies, than we thought, Matty, in terms of what we need to do. So I think that's maybe something we need to focus on when we next meet, Matty, is to get at least one of those done, because they're important. Am I right that it's part of his endpoint assessment that he's got to have these signed off? So we'll have to make it a priority, Matty, which I know it's difficult, but we'll have to, won't we? We'll have to do priority. Another priority, exactly, on top of all our other priorities.
No, you're absolutely right. The case studies are important. The idea is really that you produce over the 3 years a pool of case studies, and as you come towards that gateway meeting, we choose 3 case studies that are going to support you in your open book exam in that as part of that endpoint assessment. So they do need to be well written, and they need to make sure they are very carefully mapped to these standards as demonstration that you've applied your knowledge and understanding to your workplace. So you take those in. So you will complete your 2-hour exam. The 2-hour exam has 8 questions, and those 3 case studies will be submitted with your exam paper. Okay, so you're right. They are really, really important. And I think you're doing all the right things. You've been to the workshop. You're clear about what they're about. Remember, the focus is you. Even though they're case studies, the focus isn't really about the case or the patient you're talking about. It's about you, what you did, why you did what you did. So it's demonstrating that you're working at an advanced practice level.
Yeah, I think that's where the workshop really helped, because I think when you think of case study, you think of it like an example. So I was sort of writing it as if it was I picked the patients and just talked about the patients and sort of had that as of what a case study is in my mind, but then going to the workshop, realise it needs to be how I've learned and how I've developed during that time.
So the other part of this portfolio of evidence you might not have got to yet, as you know. So you're working on the reflections, you're working on your case studies, you know how important they are. Don't forget, don't let it slip off your radar. There's also a change report to write.
Yeah.
So again, have you and Cathy had any discussions about what you might base your change report on?
Not yet, no. I think we're just trying to get our heads around all the other aspects of the program at the moment. But I think again, that's something we're going to have to talk about, Matty. Maybe we can sit down and look at that paperwork that Cath showed you last time, and sort of get our heads around what's needed. Because am I right that is marked? Is that marked? That change report.
That is marked.
Right,
yeah. Okay. Again, part of the endpoint assessment. It supports the presentation element, but that one is marked. So again, that's really, really important. Have you got any thoughts, Matty? Have you got any ideas at this moment in time about what you might base your change report on?
Yeah, so I've been doing some sort of project work alongside this. So I think that's what the case report will be. Sorry, the change report will be based on. But again, it's just sitting down and having the time to be able to write it out. Got a good idea of what the content will be, but just want to meet with Cathy. We'll sort of go through it and plan it out a little bit in a little bit more detail and go from there.
Kerry, do you have a question?
Always, it's me. Well, the first one's a bit of an observation, which is that, you know, we've been listening to you for a little while, and it's very bureaucracy based. There's not an awful lot of conversation about education here, or what Matty has learnt from any of these things.
I mean, to be fair, we are rattling through this a bit quicker. As I say, normally this would take over an hour, generally speaking. So we're skipping through things more than we would normally. Yeah.
Okay. But there does seem to be an awful lot to do all at the same time for the student, and the mentor as well, of course. I mean, Matty, do you feel like you're learning new things, or do you feel like you're just really credentialing things you already know?
Personally, I think I've learned a lot of new things during this programme. Whether that's just because what I've done with the off-the-job training, because there hasn't really been much guidance in terms of what we do. That's been sort of led by me, really. But I think having that time outside of your normal working hours to focus on something, I think that's where I've really learned and developed. Without the apprenticeship, I don't think you get that. So in a normal masters, you might have time to sort of complete the assignments themselves, but then once they're over, you don't get the same study days, so you won't get to carry on. So I think particularly sort of outside of term time, you're still getting those a day a week really off the job. So I think that's been the time that I think I have really sort of developed and concentrated on learning new skills. And
So are you glad you did the apprenticeship rather than a traditional route, other than the money? I appreciate.
Well, that's the big one, but personally, from my point of view, I know it does come with a lot of additional work, but I think having that time to sort of step away from your day-to-day job and look at things a bit differently, I think that's where I've really benefited from.
Okay, so we've mentioned this off-the-job training that we keep talking about. So, Matty, have you put together a plan? As you say, when you attend university during normal university semesters and you're taking part in whatever activities are involved in the modules, we record your attendance. So your off-the-job training for those weeks is kind of our responsibility. But obviously now, in between semesters, between now and when the next semester starts in September, you're still getting your off-the-job training every week, hopefully. Is that right, Cathy? Still getting it?
Best we can. If we miss a week, then I try to make sure that Matty gets extra days in another week. I know that's not perfect, but I know that's something we can do. It doesn't have to be 1 day a week. It could be 2 days in 1 week and no off-the-job training the next week. It's just, am I right in that? I am right in that, aren't I?
Yeah, I mean, from an organisational point of view, semester time, university-wise, everybody has a Wednesday as their off-the-job training day each week. But obviously, you can be a bit more flexible. What is important is that Matty still gets that 20% of his normal working hours as off-the-job training time. So if you wanted to, if it helps with your service delivery, if you wanted to give him 5 days all in 1 week and have a week, that would, be the equivalent to 5 weeks worth. So you can do that as long as he gets the 20%. But this is what I was going to say, Matty, what's really important, because we've talked about reflections, standards, case studies, and a change report. What's really important is that you've got a really good plan, a fairly detailed plan of what you're going to do each week between now and when the next semester starts. Because from experience, talking to a lot of apprentices, this is the only way to manage this side of the programme, really. So, for example, We've talked about case studies. You've got ideas. Can we agree a date for you to send me a draft of your first case study? You know, if you're going to get next Wednesday, for example, is it reasonable to say by next Friday, can you send me a draft of that first case study? Think we can do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll both put that in the diary.
Yeah.
And then maybe a couple of weeks later, we'll have another case study.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what I mean. I think for all the weeks you've got between now and September, we need to be putting some deadlines in there to make sure that you make sure everything's together for when you go through the gateway. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we can get these case studies finalised and signed off, then you'll be able to focus on your change report later.
Yeah.
All right, because we've got this deadline coming, you've got a dissertation to complete. So we need to make the most effective use of the time you can now while you're not doing any of your academic modules to really make some progress on this portfolio. Yeah. So remember, when you have your ideas for your case studies, you need to discuss them with Cathy, draft them, let Cathy read them and look at them, make her comments, then send them to me. I'll have a look at them. We can bounce them back into when we think they're finalised and they're as best that they can be, then we will upload them to your evidence pack for safekeeping. Okay. And the same with reflections. The reflections don't actually go directly into the endpoint assessment, but they're still an important part of your portfolio. They can provide really sound evidence for a lot of those standards. So again, keep checking on Canvas. Don't forget there's all that guidance on Canvas. All the presentations from the workshops you mentioned, they're all on Canvas as well. So don't forget where everything is. There's loads of guidance there, but you can always email me as well and I can help you out with those kind of things.
Yeah.
So we need a detailed off-the-job training plan for between now and the semester starting.
Yeah.
In that, what we need is, again, there's a standard template on Canvas for you. But remember, everything comes back to that portfolio, the standards, the table of standards. So that all the off-the-job training you're doing, it needs to be evidencing various standards for you. Okay? So what kind of things have you been doing with your off-the-job training?
So, like I said, I've been working on a sort of a quality improvement project, which is something sort of identified early on at the start of the apprenticeship, and it's something I've just been working at alongside the whole module. So I'm just going to sort of continue to do that.
Okay, and which of the standards do you think that might help you to evidence?
So I think some of the research, that sort of support on the change, it's definitely the research, and then we're looking at sort of introducing a training package, so the sort of teaching in practice stuff, some of those standards, and then I'd probably have to go through the other standards to see which ones did meet, but there's definitely a few there.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds like a real good basis. So also off-the-job training plans in advance. So you make the best use of the time you've got and you're referring everything back to the standard. The other thing are the records. So week by week, don't forget you need to be sending in to Addy what you've actually done. So we set a plan for what you plan to do. Things don't always go according to plan, but Addy will need for your evidence pack, obviously the report form to say what you did each week and how many hours were involved. So for a full day, it's 7.5 hours. If you only manage to get half a day, or maybe you had two days in a week, that will be 15 hours. So you need to send those in again to explain what you were doing with that time.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'll do, Matty, is I will write up a contact form now, brief summary of our meeting, all the dates that we've put in, all the deadlines that we've put in for you sending me your drafts of case studies and so on, so that we can keep communicating until we meet again next time. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So any questions from anybody? I say that was very brief. It was a very condensed version. We would take a lot longer over each of the different elements, obviously. And at different times, you know, when drafts have come in, we'd be talking about, you know, you sent me a draft last week and this is my feedback, these are my comments, how are you doing? So it is quite condensed, but does it give you an idea of what's involved? Yeah. Okay. Any comments at this point?
Kate, if you want to comment.
Yeah, no, sorry, hijacking it as facilitator, but I just wanted to say I think the way you've done this is really good, really, really good. I think seeing it as a simulation is very powerful. What I would recommend, so the only thing I would recommend you maybe think about changing is actually the participation of the rest of us, because I think every time we participate, the authenticity sort of shrinks. So I would maybe say put your questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll kind of address them at the end, and then you get your kind of your bubble of simulation, because I think, I mean, I personally I would have found that easier, and it probably would be a lot easier for you because you'd have a flow and you'd go through the meeting as you would do it. But no, I think it's a really excellent way of presenting what that experience works like for the different people who are part of it. So thank you.
Oh, that's good.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think, obviously, as far as we know, we're the only apprenticeship in the university at the moment. And, you know, you talk to colleagues and friends and you mention things like lap meetings and people just, you know, means nothing to anybody. But writing something on paper or just trying to explain it doesn't really, I don't think, get things across. So I think it's, this is where the idea came from, really, was to maybe if we could show people, if we could let people sit in and be a bit of a fly on the wall, that would probably be the best way to do this. So that's where the idea came from, really. Terry?
Go on.
I've just got my church bells going off because it's 11 o'clock. So if somebody else has got a comment, please go to them first.
That's okay. We do have a few questions if you were happy and you have a couple of minutes just to write them in the chat for us, unless you're dashing off to something else. If we just put those on the screen as well, that would be really helpful for us, because as I say, we haven't done this before.
Kath, when you shared your screen before, I didn't see it. I don't know whether that was just me.
Oh.
Yeah, just need you to try again. No. All right. You talked us through it. It's fine.
No, it was fine. Okay, I can see a slide that says evaluation.
Can you see that now? Brilliant. Yeah. So what the kind of questions we wanted to ask was, as I say, if you mind typing in the chat for us, and hopefully we can get a copy of that. But prior to this workshop, what was your understanding of a lap meeting, if any at all?
I think if you could put all the questions up, and then if anybody has to leave, thank you very much for coming. We really did appreciate it. And anyone who's got time to put the answers in, if you put in Q1, Q2, Q3, then we'll be able to see which relate to what.
So I'm just going to answer one or two, then that's great. You know,
fabulous.
We know everyone's time is short.
Yeah.
And I would like to thank very much the three of you for bringing this to the conference. I think it's been fantastic, and we're very appreciative of that. So thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming.
Thanks especially to Matty.
Yes,
on annual leave.
The time.
On annual leave, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matty. That's really kind of you to give us that time. Thank you.